Hi, good morning, good evening. Welcome back to the Jyotish Network YouTube channel. This channel is something that a group of us budding, enthusiastic, practicing astrologers have started just to create better awareness about the ancient astrological science of India called Jyotish. In today's episode, we will be spending some time to talk about one of the most sought after topics, which is on wealth creating combinations in our chart. Now, please mind you, in Jyotish, there are many combinations which can indicate static potential for wealth. What we are going to cover in this episode is what is loosely grouped under a category called Dhan Yogas. And so, any other combinations of wealth that might exist in the scriptures will be covered in a later episode. Now, before proceeding ahead, please do like and subscribe the channel. It gives us constant encouragement to do this more. And for all of those who gave their feedback and comments on the first video, thank you so much. And I hope you like this episode as well. So I'll hand it over to my colleagues, Sandeep, KP, and Visu to also participate. And Sandeep, over to you.
Thanks, Pulak, and good to be back with everyone, all our viewers. Thank you so much for the last video. Your feedback was very encouraging. So let's get dive into the topic today. And today's topic is Dhan Yoga. Right? Dhan Yoga is wealth and something that everyone desires, everyone wants. And yet we see a tremendous contrast in life around us in terms of the amount of wealth people have. Some are just absolutely top of the world, and some of us live average lives and aspire to have more and more of wealth. So we thought, let's talk about this particular aspect of Jyotish. So what is a Dhan Yoga, Visu? How do you see that?
So Dhan Yoga, there are certain houses that are classified as money-giving houses in the
Mhm.
horoscope. So you basically have to hone in on those houses, see and how those house and house slots are configured. So if those house slots and houses show promise in your chart, then it could lead to something or other, and the magnitude will be different based on how they are configured and which houses take prominence. So probably once we see the combinations, then we can elaborate on that more.
I think another question which came up, Pulak, was that what's the concept of yoga? Why? What is the meaning of that word, and why? And what's the combining of houses all about? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Sandeep. So, I mean, the word yoga has been popularized a lot in the last few decades, but that just focuses on the physical, manifestation of yoga. Yoga, I mean, the Sanskrit definition is that it's a union, right? And so, in Jyotish or astrological terms, it's a union of planets.
Okay.
And so when this yoga or union happens,
Hmm.
the inherent planets exchange energies or at least influence each other.
Mhm.
And we study these combinations of how planets are influencing each other to study the static potential of success, fame,
Hmm.
wealth, or any other area of life, right? So that was the answer from my
And
side.
yeah, there are so many, and there are a lot of beginners who watch the video series, and some of them last time also said, while we have confusions, and I'm sure they are beginners, is about a house. One house has so many meanings, and then we look at a specific house for combining either in Raj Yogas or Dhan Yogas. So can you speak about a little bit about maybe KP can speak about it, or Visu can comment on why those specific houses are picked up for Dhan Yoga houses, the second, the 11th, the fifth, or the ninth. What about them? KP, would you
Yeah,
like to
Sandeep,
comment?
that's a good point. Yeah, sure. So, like usually the houses that we consider for wealth, 2 and 11 are the two houses that come in my mind. And like the second house, as you know, it's the house of fixed assets, the house of wealth. It's also referred to as the Dhanasthana. And the 11th house is classically supposed to be the house of gates.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
that's why like 2 and 11 are like quite important in any Dhana Yoga combinations.
Okay. Vivi, any thoughts on the fifth house and the ninth house? Why, why do they get picked up for Dhan Yoga combinations?
So usually when you see a chart, there are some, so we call the one houses 159 as Lakshmi Sthanas, right? And then 14710 as the Vishnu Sthanas or Kendras. So as the name implies, so it's Lakshmi is not just wealth, like the money, or it's just the prosperity in general, right? Prosperity in life, or everybody has their own preferences on what they classified as prosperity. So since we are just talking about the Dhana Yoga, let's call that as if we just focus on the prosperity in terms of wealth, then the 159, as the name implies, then it definitely suggests that it has to do with one of the areas that it has to do with as well, right? And then as KP mentioned, the house 2 and 11, the second house is the Dhanasthana, and the 11th house is the Labhasthana, the house of gains. So those five houses form a main.
Okay. In fact, something interesting, I was thinking about it and it crossed my mind that the fifth house is also the something about your ability to discern, the concept of vivek comes into thought. It's the inclinations of the mind, it's about intelligence and all that stuff. The ninth house is sheer fortune, right? So it's luck, it's bhagya. It's also called the bhagya sthan. So obviously, when discernment of mind or your mental inclinations and your fortune or your bhagya is favoring you in context to the houses of wealth and income, I think maybe that's what the logic behind this whole formation of a Dhan Yoga, comes up too. With that, Pulak, why, a lot of people have Dhan Yogas, but then never see too much of Dhan in their life. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Sandeep, I think we covered this in the Raj Yoga episode as well. It's the same 24 karat gold kind of an analogy, right? So what we look at is obviously while studying the static potential in a chart, how many such combinations are getting formed. That's point one. Whether these combinations repeat from alternate lagnas. So in this case, it will be Chandra Lagna or Dasha Lagna. Um, and then the constituting planets, do they have any source of strength or not? Right? Are they in a good condition? And finally, whether there's a benefic influence on this forming Dhan Yoga.
Mhm.
That's what we look at, right? So typically, the more such combinations exist, then the more they repeat from different lagnas and the more they have sources of strength, the results will be more amplified. I think we also should not forget the role of Rahu Ketu in this. So I'll probably hand it back to you, Sandeep and KP and VV to just talk about that also.
Yeah, Vivi, anything on Rahu Ketu? Pulak mentioned interestingly, and Rahu Ketu essentially, becomes very important to talk about them because there is so much of fear and about Rahu and Saturn and Mars. So, are we saying even they are capable of giving Dhan Yoga, being planets which are negative planets, which kind of bring all kinds of problems in life?
Rightly asked, Sandeep. So uh, there is no one planet that is completely good or completely bad in your chart. So if you just think like, even if you have a choice to form a horoscope for yourself, you cannot come with a chart that is like 100% perfect. So like, so as you said, each planet has its own strengths, and each planet has its own agenda to teach us some lessons so that we better ourselves. And as you pointed out, Rahu and Ketu, as their inherent to their nature, they are Maya, right? So it's their nature to make us confused. To only if you really want to know them, you have to dig deeper and get to know them, right? So
Interesting.
just from the point of view of yoga, I think it was touched upon in the last video as well. Rahu and Ketu, they can magnify the results based on the configuration.
Okay.
So in the Shastra, it was given us, if they are in the right condition, they can, it will prablav. So the prablav is the term that was used in Shastra, right? So it can magnify the results, depending on how they are configured. And based on the malefics or benefics, it doesn't matter if the malefics forms Dhan Yoga, it will show its potential, but it will show its potential in other ways too. Let's say the Saturn and Venus, they are very good friends. And when good friends form Dhan Yoga or Raj Yoga, it is going to be beneficial. So it will show its result in terms of the yogas. But can we ask whether Saturn is afflicting the Venus? Yes, of course. It's not either or, it is always both.
Yeah, everything in a chart plays out. Everything has a significance. Everything has a meaning. There is a dimension to it. And we got to kind of look at it much deeper. KP, Vivi said that there is this Rahu kind of takes on the form of planets it's with, and is that how Rahu Ketu get pulled into a Dhan Yoga as well? KP, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure, Sandeep. Sorry, I was on mute. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, Rahu and Ketu, they are shadow planets, and we have so many practical examples that we have tried to study and research, where we have seen that they do indeed give the results of the sign that they are in, based on the house lordship, and they like. Sorry, I meant to say house dispositorship, and at the same time, even like there are a lot of other things that we look at, like Rahu and Ketu. They also give the results of the planets that are influencing them. So if there is like an aspect of Mars, or if there is an aspect of Jupiter on Rahu or Ketu, Rahu or Ketu are both capable of giving the results of Mars as well as Jupiter in that case. And also we have seen even the nakshatra lord of Rahu and Ketu, even that sometimes becomes very relevant.
Okay, so let's just take a look at the next slide and say, for our viewers to get an idea of, what are the combinations, which are the houses involved, and how these combinations can be formed, in the sense that what is a yuti, what is a mutual drishti or parivartana, between between the houses of 2, 1, 2, 5, 9, 11. The next slide will also show us about, so I think this is pretty much the same slide. You've got the North Indian, South Indian format. Houses are marked there by the stars. And the next slide will show to us about, how things, what are the conditions, or what are the alternate, lagnas, etc., in terms of qualifying it. So we've got planets which are strong, repeats from alternative lagnas, like Pulak said. The main birth chart, the D1, and if it up within the D1, it operates from the Chandra Lagna, being another very important Lagna in Jyotish. And the results are, of course, experienced during the Dasha, either a Mahadasha or an Antardasha. Okay, guys. So let's see some examples for our viewers to kind of say, fine, this is how it operates, but does it really show up in the lives of some real people? Do these combinations really show up the way they do? Yeah. So, KP, you sharing screen with the charts?
Yeah, and while KP is doing that, I just want to again sort of quickly summarize, for especially for those who are new to the subject completely, just adding on to what Sandeep, KP, and VV said. Essentially, when you're looking at your chart, you're looking at the 1, 2, 5, 9, 11 houses and their house lords, and to seeing whether they combine in a certain way in your chart, and they can either combine in one of these wealth houses, they can combine in any other house as well,
Mhm.
or they can even form these yogas by placement. So, for example, you might have the ruler of the 11th being placed in the ninth house, as an
Oh,
example.
okay. Okay.
And so we are looking for placement, conjunction, exchange, mutual aspect
Hmm.
when it concerns these wealth giving houses.
Oh,
So, yeah.
wonderful. So, who
Can you
will?
guys see my screen? Sorry, Sandeep.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect.
Your screen is there.
Okay. And let's just turn off the videos so that we have a full screen.
Yes, so that we can see the screen dedicatedly. Wonderful. Okay, so here we have the first chart, and this is, and we'll go just by identifying the houses. So let's look at the Lagna Lord. Lagna Lord is Mars. We're looking for these planets to be combining somewhere, right? So we're looking at the second house, like Vivi said, house of wealth. So that's Jupiter. We are looking at the fifth house, again, Jupiter. So Jupiter owns these two houses. Jupiter becomes a very interesting planet for with the potential of giving wealth if it combines well. And we got the moon, which is the ninth lord, and Mercury, who's the 11th lord. So now if we look at how and where are these planets combining, we tend to kind of, go into this zone here where we have the moon, the Jupiter, and Sun in the 12th house in Libra. And we have Mercury and Saturn here in the 11th house in Virgo. Mercury is strong. There's no particular strength here to, either Jupiter or Moon. Uh, they are, however, not aspected by any malefics. Now, that's an important point in Jyotish always. If planets are aspected by benefics, they enhance results. If they are aspected by malefics, they kind of tend to then pull back a little bit. But here we see there is no aspect of either Mars or Saturn onto this combination. And this combination is now the second lord, the fifth lord, and the ninth lord, all coming together into this combination here. Any comments, guys, from your side? Something you'd like to highlight or add?
Right. So the another thing that we need to look at the chart is, as we have pointed out already, uh, it's the yoga is going to be formed by the placements or conjunctions of this 1, 2, 5, 9, 11 houses. But it is very important to see whether those pattern, especially by the same planets, repeat from other lagnas too.
Sure.
And so especially from Chandra Lagna and Dasha Lagna as well.
Sure, sure. And at this stage, we are looking at simply, this person's life folds out with a certain dasha sequence. And we said planets tell us what, dashas tell us when. So she's born in the Rahu dasha, which is just about 6 years, first 6 years of her life, early childhood, and gets into a Jupiter dasha straight after that, which is from the age of 6 till about 22. And we see Jupiter as the second lord, fifth lord, combining with the ninth lord here in this combination. The Jupiter dasha obviously is going to bring her fortune. She grows up, she joins her, father's. She's growing up in luxury. There is, she is enjoying it, not directly, but through her father's efforts, because for her to enjoy that in this age, it has to come from the benefactor. Soon as she turns 22, she starts the Saturn dasha. Now, Saturn here is not configured in any great yoga as such. However, it is with Mercury. It's in the 11th house of gains, without the aspect of any malefics. It's in the Rahu Ketu axis. So this Saturn now gets her, and it's interesting when you read about her that she starts working in her father's factory, and she continues to work in that factory and rise from the packaging department right up to a senior level, and eventually in the Mercury dasha is when she gets inheritance from her father. Her father passes away, and she inherits the whole, business. Now, guess what? From here, she enters Ketu dasha, and we said the nodes are capable of giving results of the house lords where they are posted. So, disposited by Jupiter. Now, this Jupiter is back in that same combination. And so she runs Ketu, which is till the age of 65. and Venus and Sun subsequently. So we see how, this whole thing played out. And who's this person? This person is no more now. She died at the age of 93 in September 2017. It's a woman called Liliane Bettencourt, who was the principal shareholder of L'Oreal, right? The cosmetics company. I think those of us who are married can't miss L'Oreal because almost everyone in the house uses L'Oreal hair color, and that's the most famous product they have. Her estimated net worth when she died was at $44 billion. And that's how having these yogas, having them operate at the right stage of life, can just transform what a life can be. Any comments, Pulak or KP?
Yeah, I would just like to add just on the sources of strength in the
Yeah,
planet. So
yeah,
you've got Saturn and Saturn in the 11th house with the 11th lord, which is strong in its own sign,
yeah,
right? And you've got Venus, which is Vargotama, in the sense that its sign placement repeats in the divisional chart of Navamsha or the D9 chart.
yeah.
You got a Vargotama exalted Mars
Mm,
in the D9 as well,
yeah,
right? And it's interesting because you talked about how she ran the periods of Mercury and Saturn, which are in the 11th house.
yeah,
So the strength of sort of Mercury being the 11th lord in the 11th house actually showed up in that sense.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, Sandeep, just to add to that, a quick note, you also mentioned that as soon as she started her Mercury Dasha, she inherited the whole business from her father.
Very true.
And like Pulak mentioned, Mercury is very well placed in its own sign. And it also happens to be the eighth lord of inheritance.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Yeah,
KP.
very true. Very true. Yeah, very true. Of course, there are other yogas, right? Like Pulak said in the beginning of today's video, that we're not kind of touching upon them. There are a couple of other yogas which are getting formed by planets, right? Raj Yoga, Dhan Yoga is what we spoke about last time, and this episode is kind of restricting it to house lordship. So when planets own certain houses, and when they combine in a yoga, they give rise to a certain Raj Yoga or a Dhan Yoga. Uh, and the other yogas which are possibly here, we will kind of come back to them in the next episode, which will be based on Graha yogas, which can give eminence or wealth. So we will possibly talk about some of them in the next episode, the most commonly used ones, or the ones which are fairly found in the lives of celebrities and people who achieve greatness. So do you want to see our next chart? We saw how in this life it unfolded. You want
Sure,
to take?
Sandeep. I just switched it.
Oh, wonderful. So who'd like to take it up?
Okay, so
Walk us
this
through it.
this chart is a pretty interesting chart in the sense it shows. I mean, if you study the chart in detail, it shows how this person ran certain periods in his life which enabled him to earn a lot of wealth. But then the moment the Mahadasha changed, this person got heavily involved in philanthropic efforts
Hmm.
with his wife as well. So we are not obviously going to cover philanthropy in this episode,
True.
but this let's just study the chart the way it is. Obviously, this person is a Cancer ascendant,
Hmm.
and the Lagna Lord goes to the fifth house. It's debilitated,
Yeah.
but it's still a 1-5 Dhan Yoga. And you've got Jupiter and Venus, which rule the ninth house and the 11th house, going to the Lagna. So now Jupiter obviously gets directional strength. Being in the
Yeah.
first house, it's also exalted.
Yeah.
And Venus obviously is another benefic. So the two benefics are combining in the first house, forming a 1-9 Dhan Yoga, a 1-11 Dhan Yoga, and then a 9-11 Dhan Yoga.
Hmm.
Then you've got Saturn and Mars,
Mhm.
which form Raj Yoga, in the sense Mars rules the fifth house, Saturn rules the seventh house. So they are in a mutual aspect. So they form Raj Yogas. And I'll just give a brief background of this person. But before that, if anybody wants to just pitch in terms of any other observations, then we can cover that as well. I do want to make one point that from the birth lagna, Saturn rules the eighth house, and Mercury rules the eighth house from the Chandra lagna, and Mercury strong in its own sign as the eighth lord in the eighth house. That has some implications. But one of the things that we didn't cover in the Dhan Yoga definitions was the role of the eighth house and eighth lord.
Oh,
It's not generally uh, mentioned in the same line as all the other houses that we talked about, but
good point.
eighth house can indicate sudden gains, inheritance,
Absolutely.
and that is also an important thing to consider. So
Yeah.
I'll take a pause.
Yeah. So I think just to quickly, come back to some of us, if you're concerned about the Lagna Lord being debilitated, guys, there's cancellation. So don't worry about that. Venus being in the Kendra, in the first house, kind of is one of the factors that cancels it. Uh, and So there is Nicha Bhanga, as it is called. Venus is also participating. So Venus is quite a pivotal planet. Venus and Jupiter are pivotal. No, again, no malefic aspects onto them, right? So they sit pretty neat, healthy in those houses. Sun, the second lord, goes to the 12th house. 12th house is losses. And I think you mentioned spirituality and philanthropy, right? We're not touching on that, but we're seeing a wealth house lord go to the 12th house of charity, maybe religious, maybe spiritual, etc. But yeah, I think Venus and Jupiter become the pivotal planets here. Any thoughts, KP, BB, you'd like to add something? And then I have a last point uh, after that.
Right. So the one point, yeah, you guys have covered all the points from the Dhana Yoga perspective, and it is good to have Jupiter two benefits, two natural benefits in the Lagna, and especially in the conditions that they are in. One is exalted, so it forms a special kind of yoga. So when the two benefics are in the first house, it forms a yoga called Chamara Yoga. So
Absolutely.
it adds to the Dhana Yoga, the any yogas that gets formed in the chart, it gets amplified by this.
True. Absolutely.
That's a good
Hey,
point, Vivi. Yeah. KP?
hey Pulak, do you want to reveal who this person
Oh,
is?
so before you do that, I just want you, our
Uh-huh.
viewers, I want to take I want to take our viewers through the Dasha sequence, guys, just so again, something
Sure.
interesting. First 7 years the person spends is in Mercury. So obviously it's early childhood, first 5, 6, 7 years. And then comes Ketu. Now, again, a demonstration of the same principle. Ketu can and Rahu can give, yoga results. Ketu is in the house owned by Venus. And we said Venus is that pivotal planet, right? And the turn of fortune begins. Possibly, it's a massive, long 20-year dasha, starting from the age of 14 to 34, right? Uh, so this person is obviously going to make a fortune. He's going to be 22, and then he's going to be possibly getting into work, or maybe starts work very early. And Venus is when all that money is going to come through. Then we have Sun. Sun is the second lord, yeah, with the 12th lord. And I would be surprised if we read up about him that, yeah, in Sun, he started off with his philanthropy or maybe work, or he was making money abroad or something of that kind. So again, the dasha sequence kind of is important. The right dasha falling at the right time.
You're absolutely spot on, Sandeep. So this person's name is Pierre Omidyar. He is the founder of eBay, which
Ah, okay.
at one point of time
Yeah.
used to be and still is, I guess, a very large e-commerce platform company. Now it's interesting. He started. He's been a serial startup person, in the sense
Mhm,
he sold his first startup to Microsoft,
mhm,
and that happened in the Venus Saturn period in 1996. Now, that he started a startup called eShop, and that's what he sold to Microsoft in the Venus Saturn period. In
Mhm.
the same Venus Saturn period, he started another company called Auction Web,
Mhm.
which later got rebranded itself into eBay. Right now, in Venus Mercury, this eBay goes public,
Mm.
and that's when he makes a ton of money, because there's a public listing of the company. Now, there are two or three things that I wanted to point out. First, the role of the 11th house, not just in terms of gains. Venus being the pivotal planet, like you said, rules the 11th house. 11th house is also about loosely social media, or in those days it would have been, I'm guessing, something to do with the internet. um, and if you look at Venus Mercury, and I was actually thinking about it, why did Venus Mercury result in gains through the public listing? And that's where I think Chandra Lagna also becomes important, because from Chandra Lagna, Venus and Jupiter again are involved in yoga formations in the ninth house of fortune, and Mercury rules becomes a strong eighth lord in the eighth house, and eighth house is basically sudden gains, or it's the other people's assets, right? That you have to consider as well.
Yeah,
And like you said, the moment the Sun period began, this person got heavily involved in philanthropy.
interesting. That's interesting, and something I was noticing, and we haven't really touched upon as yet, and possibly we can do another, a complete episode on that. A very subtle point in Jyotish, VB and KP will agree, is the whole thing about nakshatras, right? Which nakshatra is the planet posited in, as it tends to kind of also give those results in its dashas. And if you notice Mercury, interestingly, it's in Jupiter's nakshatra, right? And Jupiter is in that pivotal, Dhan Yoga of this guy's life. So Mercury during its Antardasha or Mahadashas would also give the results of its nakshatra lord. And so the more you explore Jyotish, viewers, the more you are amazed by how, it turns out to be accurate, and you can continue to learn the principles, examine across a number of charts, establish a pattern for yourself, and that then starts becoming your ability to then see a chart and say, hey, I see something similar here, and I think I can very easily predict and say something with a fair degree of surety. So so we more or less at the end, we just wanted to do a shorter episode of 30 minutes. Some of our viewers said, too long last time. So we're keeping it short. We're keeping it to the point. Any last line ads or comments from either Pulak, Vivi, or KP? And we can then thank our viewers for this episode.
Yeah, just on the side note, so we did see that the planets that form some good configuration in the 12th house led to philanthropy, and we did see in the previous chart also the Jupiter, Sun, Moon, they all formed that in the 12th house, and she was also involved in philanthropy.
Oh, yes. In fact, I forgot to say about that about Liliane. She was known to contribute every year in millions of euros. In one of the years, the highest contribution she made to charity was something in the tune of, I think, some 5 or 7 million euros. And this was a consistent affair in her life. So, anything, KP, you like to add a last thought, and then Pulak, and then Pulak can help us sum up.
Yeah, I would again like to reiterate like how like even like the house where the yoga takes place, it's quite relevant when you do like a complete chart analysis. And like we saw like repeating patterns where like either it was the eighth lord or the 12th lord or the eighth house or the 12th house. And we saw those yogas getting formed there, and we saw that uh, this like these people they actually experience the results of that particular house.
Those houses as well. Great. Awesome.
Yep.
So, Pulak, with your thoughts, can you help us also sum up and let us and give us an idea what can the viewers expect in the next episode?
Sure. And so I hope, first of all, the viewers found something useful through this episode. Now, like Sandeep was mentioning, we want to do a multi-part series just on looking at wealth potential. So I
Mhm.
think this is going to be a 3-episode series, or at least a 2-episode series.
Yeah.
And what we intend to do is cover special Graha Yoga combinations like Lakshmi Yoga and all in the next time. Just look at wealth. And then, Sandeep, you had a very interesting concept of the yogi point, which I think viewers will find really useful and informative to consider as well. So, probably we are going to look at 2 potential episodes if there is interest.
Wonderful.
And so, so I hope this was useful. And just to summarize, Dhan Yogas need are yogas which indicate wealth. One of the ways we look at house 1, 2, 5, 9, and 11 and their lords either combining in a certain way through mutual aspect, through conjunction, through exchange, or through placement. We also looked at the inherent strengths of the forming planets that form these yogas, and the more they repeat from different lagnas, the birth lagna, the chandra lagna, the dasha lagna, like my friends here mentioned, the more is the probability of the yogas giving their effect at the right dasha sequence.
Absolutely.
So that was, in summary, what this episode was all about. I hope you enjoyed it, found something useful. Please do like and subscribe, and please keep it interactive. Please share your feedback and comments on what else we can do to
Absolutely.
make it better.
Absolutely. And with that, we let's sign off. Thank you so much. Thanks, all of you and our viewers. And do let us know what topics are of interest to you, and we'd love to do our videos on them. With that, we sign off. See you and bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.